Hi, I'm Rachel Wright, Certified Jira Administrator and author of the Jira Strategy Admin Workbook. I'm excited to take a break from my travels today to attend JiraCon 22 and chat about some of my favorite Jira features right now, which are automation. I use automation to make tasks easier in my work and my personal life. And today I'll show you some of Jira's awesome automation capabilities. I'll share some of my favorite triggers, actions, and smart values, and I'll demo some rules I've built for customers. Let's get started. There are many ways to use automation in Jira. In this presentation, I'll show examples using the built-in Jira Cloud and Jira Service Management Cloud type, like in this screenshot. Don't worry if you have server, data center, or an automation app, because in most cases, the concepts are the same. Just be aware that there are slight feature, terminology, and user interface differences between Jira deployment types. For example, in Cloud, Jira software has built-in automation, or you can use a variety of apps from the Atlassian Marketplace. Jira Service Management also has built-in automation, apps, and an older set of legacy rules and features. This month, Atlassian is removing legacy automation for sites with no rules or executions in the last 180 days. Definitely use the new automation type to take advantage of the new capabilities and the great rule builder. In Server and Data Center, Jira software doesn't come with automation, but you can add it with an app. And Jira Service Management has some automation capabilities which are similar to the legacy capabilities in JSM Cloud. Now, I know everyone is probably at a different place in their automation journey, and that's all right. If your organization is still filing requests via email or on paper, then adopting Jira at all might be the first step in automating your processes. Or maybe you're past that and you're exploring Jira's built-in time-saving features, like component auto-assignment, workflow behaviors, like triggers, conditions, validators, and post functions, and custom notification events. And if you're at a more advanced level, you're likely extending Jira capabilities with apps, integrations, scripting, and more. We'll focus on the examples in the third level today. Before we get to the examples, let's quickly discuss the different elements used in automation. In Jira, each automation is called a rule. Rules contain different elements that control behavior. As you can see in the screenshot, the elements are labeled components. I don't want to confuse them with the components field in a Jira project though, so for today, I'll call them elements. The first element is a trigger, which specifies when a rule is run. For example, do something automatically when a new issue is created, when a field changes, when a comment is added, and more. A trigger is required for every rule. Next is a branch, which allows actions on issues related to the issue that triggered the rule. For example, if an estimate changes in a subtask, then update the estimate in the parent task. The trigger listens for a change in the parent issue, and the branch updates any child issues. Branches allow rules to have multiple paths instead of a single linear path. Branches are optional, however. Next, conditions determine the scope of the rule and how much data is impacted. It's an if statement, like, if an issue is included in this JQL query, do X. Or if a field contains a specific value, do Y. The rule continues along its defined path, as long as all conditions are met. Conditions are also optional. Next, actions determine what is done or performed. For example, assign, transition, or edit a Jira issue. There are also actions for other integrated applications. You can automatically send a chat message to Slack or Microsoft Teams, create a page in Confluence, or create a software branch in Bitbucket or GitHub. Every rule needs one or more actions. And finally, there are some additional automation capabilities I wanted you to know about. The first is smart values. These are variables and functions to access data or manipulate it. Smart values give you unlimited power over Jira data. You can use them to do math, format data, set default values, and much more. You can even create your own custom smart values. As the screenshot shows, smart values start and end with curly brackets. Here's a simple example. The screenshot shows a Jira project for the Human Resources team. I can access the project's unique key using the project.key smart tag. In this example, the key is HR. Similarly, issue.key returns a project key and an issue's ID number, like HR1. Next, use the Allow Rule Trigger option to start a rule in response to another rule. You'll find this option on the Rule Details page. Also on the Rule Details page is the Actor field. Use this to specify the user logged as the executor of the automation and its actions. I almost always use the default automation for Jira selection or a service account. Otherwise, if I specify my user account, for example, others think I personally edited their issues and they line up at my desk to ask why. Finally, there's also an automation-specific audit log to help troubleshoot any problems or undesired outcomes. In this example, you can see that the rule ran, but no actions were performed. Click the Show More link on the right for some clues why. The audit log shows that the rule was run on the issue HR1, but on the left, we see that the JQL statement for this rule only applies to the demo project. So we either need to update the JQL to include the HR project, or run the rule on an issue in the demo project instead. In addition to no actions performed, the audit log shows when rules fail, succeed, or a configuration change is made. Now that we've discussed the different elements, I'd like to share some of my favorites. I picked my top 3 in each category. My favorite trigger is actually the manual one. It's my best friend because it allows me to test a new automation's result exactly when I want and without unintentionally messing up a large number of issues. Once I've tested the rule and it's ready to use, I simply change the manual trigger to an automated one. I'll show you a cool way to use this trigger later in the presentation. Next, the scheduled trigger is also super useful. You can set a rule to run every X minutes, hours, days, weeks, or months. This trigger can also run a JQL search and execute actions for each issue in the query. Finally, you can also use a cron job, which allows more granular scheduling capabilities. My last favorite trigger is called Project Created. This makes my life as a Jira administrator so much easier. I'll show you an example of this in the next section. Next, for conditions, the JQL condition is definitely the one I use most often. Any data that JQL can access can be used to allow or limit automation actions. In this example, the automation will only run if the project is Refactor Fulfillment Module and the component is Database. Don't miss the little Validate Query link on the right, which checks syntax and counts the number of issues found. Now in Jira, a JQL query is validated and values are suggested as you type. But this area doesn't have that feature, however. Always make sure your query is correctly formed and the number of issues found is plausible before moving on to the next rule building step. My next favorite condition is the if-else block. In the screenshot, I've asked the automation engine to transition issues from the open status to in progress, but only for issues that meet certain criteria. In this case, the rule will only continue if an issue's component field is empty. This condition is super flexible. You can use both and or to check multiple fields, for example. My last most used condition is called issue fields. It's really easy to use because the rule builder does all the hard work for you. Simply select a standard or custom field, and the builder will determine which conditions and values are available. In this example, I'm checking that the component is either database or backend before the rule continues on. Next, here's some of my favorite actions. Let's start with send email. I use this one really often, either to send custom messages to Jira users, Jira groups, and even non-Jira external email addresses. You can use smart values in the email subject line and the message body for dynamic content. This example sends an email alert to an issues assignee when the time to first response SLA is about to expire. There's a condition to only send the message when the reporter is in the executives group. And we've got to keep the execs happy, right? Next, I frequently use automation or workflow post functions to automatically assign issues at different steps in its life cycle. It's one less thing a user has to do manually, and it cuts down on incorrect assignment, which always wastes time. As long as Jira has the data to determine the proper assignee, you can use this action anywhere you want. My last favorite action is totally underrated. When I'm building and testing issues, I always make sure the last rule element is log action. Use this to capture any variables in a log so you can check that they return the information expected. After testing, you can remove the action if you want. In this example, I'm checking that 3 variables return the intended response. And finally, here are a few of my favorite smart values. Use the format issue.property to access data in any standard or custom field. There are dozens of examples, but here are 2 easy ones. The first returns an issue's current status, and the second returns an issue's full URL. I frequently use the issue URL with the send email action. That way the recipient can click a link and go straight to the related issue in Jira. To return a Jira user's first and last name, use issue assignee display name. In Cloud, if you use name instead of display name, you'll get the user's account ID, which is a long string of numbers and letters. Use issue comments last body to get the contents of the most recent comment. Here are some time and date examples. Issue updated returns the last updated date in the format shown, but I typically use the date format function to make the result more readable. Here are some user examples. The first is for getting a single name from a user picker custom field. But what if a field contains multiple users or sets of data? This smart value format is slightly different. Use the second format to gather multiple results. This example returns a first name, last name, email address, and a comma at the end, just to improve formatting. Now if I go back to my programming days, which was a long time ago, this example reminds me of an array. And here's one more example to mention. We already saw the if-else condition in the rule builder, but you can also use if statements with smart values. The example assumes there's a custom user picker field named dev. If the field has a value, then the sentence is displayed, emailed, sent to a chat program, or whatever action is desired. Okay, now it's time for some fun. Let's see some real automation examples in Jira. Alright, well, welcome to one of my Jira test applications. This is Jira Cloud, and as I mentioned earlier, Cloud, Data Center, and Server all have a slightly different look and feel, different terminology, different features and functions, and even within Cloud I've noticed that depending on when the site was created, you might see some differences too. So don't worry if your application doesn't look exactly like mine. Alright, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to show you some examples and some use cases that I built for customers. I'll talk a little bit about why we built it and what problem we were trying to solve. We'll discuss all the elements in the rule, then we'll run the rule, and we'll cross our fingers that the rule does what I expect it to. Alright, let's go. Alright, our first rule is an example of a simple SLA, or service level agreement. The company wasn't ready for Jira Service Management, and they didn't want to add an app to give them SLA functionality, so we did something simple with automation. So the description for this rule is calculate and fill the due date custom field when the priority standard field is originally set. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to limit the rule to the Human Resources Jira project. And my trigger is going to be priority. So we're telling Jira here to monitor the priority field for changes, and any change type is acceptable. And this is only for the create issue action. We determined that we wanted to calculate the due date on creation, and then later if the priority changes, that's okay, but we didn't want to also change the date. We wanted a human to kind of review why the priority changed and pick a more suitable date. So that's our trigger. A very simple if block here, and we're just looking for different values within the priority field. So this is the one for highest, and if the value is highest, we are going to fill the due date with this smart value. So it's issue created plus 3 days, and I want to format it nicely in a way that Jira can understand. So we're saying highest priority, due date should be 3 days from now, automatically fill that in. And then we have another series of if statements for high, and that smart value is going to add 7 days to the creation date. And we also did one for medium, and that's going to add 14 days to the creation date. Now we didn't do any of the other priority values, but that's easy to do. Alright, so let's run the rule and see how it works. So I'm in the Human Resources project. I'll create a new issue. Alright, and I'll give it a high priority. So we should have 7 days to address this request. All right, we created HR 27. And you can see my priority is high, and my due date is 7 days from today. Super simple. For this example, I'm going to run the rule first, and then we can talk about the elements. So let's first create a sample issue. Okay, here's our issue. Very simple workflow. Obviously, the client we built this for had a more interesting workflow, but for today's purposes, to do, in progress, and done is the entire workflow. And when I go to in progress, you'll see that I have a looping transition, or at least that's what I call it, called late. And what this does, each time this button is clicked, it will increment the late field by 1. So let's try it. And then sometimes you have to refresh, or just because I don't like to wait. All right, so now late equals 1. Same thing happens again if I click late. Increments by 1 every time. So ideally, you'd be able to calculate when things are late, but in this case, the customer had a third-party vendor, and there was no way for them to get the data ahead of time that they were going to be late, and they wanted to track how many times this was happening. So today this is manual, but it's possible to automate in other use cases. So let me show you how this is built. First, we need an automation, and I called it count events. And the description for the client was increment the late custom field by 1 each time a user clicks the late workflow transition, and then late is a looping workflow transition, which means it starts and ends in the very same status. So that's my trigger. In progress to in progress. The idea is not to actually do anything in the workflow, but just to create that button for the user to click. And then I used an edit fields action. And for some reason I could not get my field to show up here, but I have got, oh, now it works, of course. Okay, I guess it was just re-indexing in the background. So there's 2 ways to do it. I could either click late and then give it the smart value, or if you're having trouble finding that field, you can do it the advanced way with just a little bit of JSON code here. So one thing that you'll need for this code is the ID of the custom field. Now it's also possible to use the name of the custom field, but if you change that name later in the future, it's going to break your automation. It's just not worth it. So I always try to use an ID when I can. And it's easy to find IDs. Just go to the custom field page, look for your custom field, and then if you hover over edit details at the bottom left of my screen, you can see the ID, and it's 10132. Also, you can click edit details. It will show you that ID in the URL. So that's the easiest way to get IDs from Jira. Okay, so I've used an increment instruction and told it what field to increment. And let's just take a quick look at the workflow. So super simple. Here's my late transition in diagram mode. And we'll look at it real quick in text mode. Here's transition ID 41. Just a plain old transition, nothing special. Starts in progress, ends in progress, and no need for a transition screen. So that's it. It's super easy to increment as you'd like. I've had customers use this kind of concept to count how many times a deployment failed, or how many times a bug had to go back to QA. This is just one easy way to count without having to actually look in the activity and see how many times something happened. This example starts out in the Jira Service Management customer portal. So pretend for a second that I'm a customer. I'm on a company's website and I'm having a problem. So I'll go ahead and report it in the portal. The shopping cart displays the wrong price. All right, I've created help 71 and sent it to the support team. Okay, now I'm in the role of the support agent, and I have this request from a customer to figure out what the problem is. But I'm not a developer. I don't know. It could be a coupon code being applied incorrectly. It could be a price wrong in the pricing table. It could be all sorts of things. It could be a logic bug. So I need the dev team to help out with this. So I'm going to go run an automation to create an issue for them. So this is a manual automation. And the reason it's manual is I don't always need help from the dev team. Sometimes I can just answer the customer's question or solve their problem immediately. But in this case, I need a little more help. So I'll go ahead and run this rule. And it looks like the rule succeeded. So now in the bugs project, we'll find an issue automatically created for the team, and it's bug 7. So if you notice in bug 7, I automatically copied the title or the summary from the support ticket, and I also automatically linked it to the original support ticket too. And if I had provided more information like a description, it would have pulled that information over as well. The idea is don't make the dev team have to go to the support ticket to get all the data. Let's just push it over so they have it in one place. All right, so let's see how to do this. First, as I mentioned, it's a manual trigger, and I have it restricted to just members of the service desk, so the agents, and then also Jira administrators. I always like to add permissions for myself so I can troubleshoot things for others. So that's my manual trigger. And then here's my action, which is the clone issue action. And I've selected a project to clone into, selected an issue type, given it a summary, and actually I'm using a debug clause and also a dynamic variable there. We'll come back to that. Also, you can see if there was an attachment in the original support issue, we're copying it over to the new bug issue. Same with description, same with components, same with priority. The idea is to get all that information over there so people don't have to search for it. And then here's the way to link the issue to the support issue. So let's talk a little bit about that debug. Apparently at some time I was having trouble and I wanted to see what was going on in the background. So instead of using the log action, I can just add debug in front of the problem I'm having, and then I can check the audit log and see what information I can find. The rule was successful. Let's look at more details. And here's the debug message, and that is the summary message I was expecting. So everything's working well. I can remove that debug clause and run my rule as normal. For more information about debug, it's right here on the Atlassian website, and it explains more about it. Sometimes end users realize that issues are linked, but they forget to do the linking. Let's check out this linked related issues automation. So first, I'm looking for any time a new comment is added to an issue. And then I'm comparing using regex, and regex means regular expression, and it's essentially a pattern that we're looking for. So in this example, we've got the issue key, which is any letter A through Z, and then we've got our dash, and then we have /D, which stands for digit. So because of the unique format of a Jira issue ID, it's pretty easy to find IDs mentioned in Jira issues. And when it's found, it automatically links the two issues together. Now I'm doing this in the comments field, but you can also do this in the description field because sometimes users put Jira issue IDs in there too. All right, so let's take a look at how it works. Here's demo 60, which is an issue for a new product idea. And I'll add a comment that contains a Jira issue ID. And if I refresh, there's our link. And of course, the link is reciprocal and links both ways. JSM provides a built-in customer satisfaction or CSAT survey. It has a very simple scoring mechanism. But what if you already have a different survey tool or you don't want to use the one in JSM? Another idea is to use automation to send the customer a link to wherever satisfaction data is collected. In this example, the automation is activated when an issue transitions from the in-progress status to the resolved status, and the resolution is done. An email is sent to the reporter asking them to click a link to provide their feedback. Here's an example of that email. As you can see, I have some smart values included for dynamic information, and I also have HTML. The send email function in automation allows HTML, whereas the customer notification messages in Jira Service Management allows wiki markup. In this example, the customer wanted an easy way to request supplies from a third-party vendor. The challenges were the third-party vendor did not have Jira. They could only accept requests via email. And also, there could be multiple vendors based on what was needed, how quickly it was needed, and a whole bunch of other factors that Jira wouldn't be able to determine. So here's what we did. We create a new issue. We have a text field here. And I'll enter either one email address where we should request these supplies, or multiple email addresses separated by commas. All right, and pretend with me that a bunch of other order details are also collected, like quantity, the type of product, the requested delivery date, because that's what the customer had at the bottom of their Jira issue create form. All right, so we've created the issue. And when we move it to the requested status, that's when our automation kicks off. So let's take a look at the rule. So the trigger is looking for an issue transition. And in this workflow example, all the transitions are global. So we don't really care what the from status is. We just want to make sure that it's in the requested status. Next, we use some JQL just to make sure we don't automatically send out emails for other use cases. And we only send out this message if that text field has email addresses in it. So in this case, we're going to send two messages, a custom message to the supplier and a custom internal message just to remind people that the order was placed. Here's our sample message. We're sending it to the values in that text field. And then we have variables introduced into the email for the order information. Not only can you do conditions in your rule, you can also do conditions in your email, for example, with smart values. So here's an example. If a value exists in this custom field, then we'll print some additional information. If not, it will be blank. And we also have an internal message so the finance team can prepare for a bill from the supplier. All right, this use case is a little complicated. So one customer had Jira Service Management set up and running just like you'd expect, right? For a regular IT service desk, doing all the common things that JSM is known to do. But they had one special use case they wanted to support. They wanted to be able to initiate conversations from the agents and send them to the customer. So it's kind of a reverse conversation example. I incorrectly assumed that the agent could just create a Jira issue and JSM would send these customer notifications to the right people, but I was incorrect. So what we needed to do was we created a request form just for internal use, and then we trained the agent to change this request on behalf of to the name of the customer. Then they enter their email subject, the email message, attachment if there is one, and send it. So essentially we're creating an issue for the customer to ask them a question or to tell them to go do something. So as I mentioned, we had trouble with the notifications. None of these would send unless it was initiated from the user portal. So we took that opportunity to disable some of those notifications that we don't need because they're not sending anyway, and use automation, and the company decided to provide additional information to the customer along the way. So here's how we set this up. The description is set assignee to agent, add stakeholders as watchers, send email notification to assignee and watchers, and change the reporter or requester if the request was initiated by an agent. So in this case, our trigger is just an issue is created. That's it. There's no config. And our query is organizations equal organization name. We specifically created one for each organization so we could customize it and hard code some values that Jira just didn't know. So for example, I wanted to have the issue assigned to the agent. And in this example, the agent is myself. And then I wanted to add certain stakeholders as watchers. And of course, in this example, they're all me. But in reality, these would be agents or other stakeholders from the company. And then finally, we're going to send an email. First, we embedded the organization's first name, and then sent the issue key and the summary over, and then highly customized the information included. And the second was a notification with some help information so folks knew how to use the portal or how to create an issue from their email. And here's the fun part. So we wanted to fix the problem of correctly displaying who created this issue. And Jira has a reporter. Jira also has a creator. And the reporter can be changed at any time in the life cycle, but the creator is the same no matter what. So we use this value of the creator, look to see if it matched the current value of the reporter, and if not, we copied the creator and put them in the reporter field. So it's not quite what Jira Service Management was built for, but it's close enough to what the customer needs where they can have information flowing in both directions. I love this example because it makes life easier for the Jira administrator. So at one company, they did software development and they chose to have one Jira project per client. Now, if you've heard me speak before, you probably know that that's not my favorite model, but it certainly works. We're using the new Jira software project automation trigger to make project creation easier and get the teams onboarded into the project. So first, our trigger is project created, and we're going to follow the same path for all software projects. Next, we're going to create a version 1.0.0, and we're going to give it a dynamic start date and release date. The start date is dynamically set to the next available Monday, and the release date is 7 days later. And we'll create that version in the same project. So one last thing for the project admin to do. Next, I'm not sure my formula is perfect and returns the right information, so I added the log action so I can test it. And then next, I'm going to ask Jira to create a set of standard initial tasks that every Jira project in this use case will have. Jira hasn't created any issues, so there's no trigger issue to run this off of, so we just use a branch. When we branch the rule, we create 4 subtasks, and you can set the fields of these any way you'd like. In this way, when a new project's created, the subtasks are automatically created too, and the team is ready to start using the project immediately. No more having to import issues via CSV. This example is about ways to manage risks when you're creating and testing your rules. So I'm totally risk adverse. I am terrified that I will accidentally have my rule in an infinite loop or accidentally update more Jira issues than I was supposed to. So here's what I do to make that risk much less. First, I create a rule just to test what I'm doing, and I run it manually. We kind of talked about this at the beginning of the presentation. I've got a manual trigger, so it will only run when I specifically ask it to, and I've got it restricted to only site admins, so regular users won't see this and won't play with it. Then I write everything I collect to the audit log, just to make sure that my formula is correct, that it returns the right information. And you can see these are the last ones I've been testing. I've been trying to see when's the next Monday, when's Monday plus 7 days, what's the display name of the assignee and their ID, and then also some created statistics and formatting. So let's go ahead and run this, see how it works. From the Jira issue, I can go to rule executions on the right. It's the only one available right now. I'll go ahead and run it. The rule ran successfully. And we didn't actually change anything in this issue, we just wrote data to the log. So let's go check the log. All right, I'm in the rule details page, click audit log, and show more in the last run. Okay, so we can see that the first thing I wrote was, when's the next Monday? And today is the 25th, so indeed the next Monday is the 26th. And then if I add 7 days and format it nicely, the answer is October 3rd. So that's correct. My formula works, and now I feel comfortable using that formula other places. And of course, the other results from the other things I was testing are here. Now, I just keep a running list of the things that I'm testing, so I have my own little library here of formulas that I can use and repurpose later. So before I run any rule for real or set it to automatically run itself, I always do everything I can to test it, limit its scope, and make sure it's working exactly as desired. Here are some helpful automation resources. To test elements and rules on your own, I encourage you to visit Atlassian's Automation Playground, where you can experiment without impacting production data. It's also a great way to get new ideas and see what your colleagues are building. Visit the Sandbox website at the URL shown. Need some additional inspiration? Visit my website for 65 ways to make your Jira life easier with automation, workflow extensions, and scheduling apps. Also, watch my webinar with Tempo called How Automation Makes Us Unstoppable. If you need different features or can't get the desired data, there are many apps to explore in the Atlassian Marketplace. Visit marketplace.atlassian.com, search for automation, and filter the results by product and deployment type. Here are some useful links for help, documentation, and plenty of smart value properties and examples. And finally, don't miss my Jira Software, Jira Service Management, and Confluence courses on LinkedIn Learning. I have courses for users and for administrators. If you have questions, I'd love to hear from you. Send me an email or connect on social media. Good luck with your Jira journey, and I'll see you online.